This is the Automotive Repair Podcast Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. I'm Matt Vanzla, and we're going to Czechoslovakia. We're going to rescue our friends, and we're going to do it in a recreational vehicle. Now, who's with me? That and more after a word from our sponsors, Independent Wrench Jobs, Pico Technology, and Autel. This episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z is brought to you by Autel. Autel is a global developer and manufacturer of award-winning professional automotive diagnostic tools and service equipment, trusted by technicians, educators, and shop owners across North America. With diagnostics at their core, Autel's real-world solutions support repair workflows ranging from full-system vehicle diagnostics to servicing the most advanced automotive technologies. What sets Autel North America apart is the team behind the tools. Dedicated experts across sales, training, and technical support, each bringing deep, hands-on experience supporting professional technicians. When questions arise, you're working with people who understand the vehicles, the procedures, and the real-world demands of modern repair. Whether diagnosing complex drivability concerns, servicing TPMS systems, validating repairs, or working with ADAS and advanced safety technologies, Autel tools are engineered to support accurate, efficient repairs in strict accordance with OEM procedures and standards. To learn more about Autel and their diagnostic solutions, visit autel.com, AUTEL.com. Ever feel like you've got to play politics just to get fed? One guy gets the gravy, you get the garbage, and then the ad says, "Great culture." Independent Wrench Jobs is a new, tech-only community to help you find better independent shops. Fair dispatch, steady work, real leadership, no games. Start with the free salary survey for your city, shop-by-shop pay, perks, and benefits before you waste another interview. And if you're applying now, use Autotech Resume Pro to generate a resume and shop-specific cover letter in about 2 minutes. Built by Technician Find, serving the industry since 2017. Join free at independentwrenchjobs.com. Getting, like I had mentioned before, I guess, some emails and messages with ideas for Mount Rushmores, and I had threatened to do one, so I decided to make it more of a promise than a threat. Usually you try to do a few of them in one episode. This one might take the whole episode because I have some reservations about it. Part of me wants to just do the complete cop-out, rattle off the names, and be out. But also just kind of wrestling with the whole notion of a Mount Rushmore, right? Just like the last episode with them, and I think I even somewhat contradict myself with the choices. That was a Mount Rushmore really the best of the best, or are they like the forefathers, the foundation, or laid the foundation, stuff like that, and wrestling with that. And I think generally most people go with the Mount Rushmore just being the best of the best. So, I don't know. I'll just make it up as I go, like usual. But if you haven't figured out what the question is, or I shouldn't even say the question, I guess, but it is. What is Matt, and it's from multiple people, multiple emails about this. What are my Mount Rushmore of trainers, educators? Yeah, that's rough, but I'm going to go for it anyways. And I guess what I want to do a little bit is kind of wrestle with it live, or at least as I go here, simply because when you start considering, like, I could just rattle off the 4 names and be done. I guess it bothers me in that there are people who may not be on the Rushmore, or at least mine. Not that mine's so important, but they maybe don't make mine. They probably make others. And yet they are important in that at one time, and in some cases still, they're very well looked on. Like they were the ones that inspired the next generation that went on to inspire the next generation, right? That's just how it works. Pick the Rushmore, right? We could do whatever professional athletes and scientists and whatever. So here I sit. If the Mount Rushmore is made up of those that laid foundations, then, I don't know how far back it goes. Who were the first instructors out there in the manner that we think of as instructors, the traveling instructors, the ones you go to a training conference for, stuff like that. And a couple names come to mind, actually, really 3 off the cuff, and I might think of more. And they aren't on my Mount Rushmore, but it would bother me to not bring up their names. And one of them is Bill Fulton. If I recall, I think he even was an award-winning presenter, or award-winning instructor, educator. And he did travel, wrote articles for trade magazines. I think he still might. He was one of those that I think inspired a lot of the next generation instructors, as well as, educating professional mechanical and technical specialists. So he was a road dog, right? If I remember, again, going back a ways, but I think he traveled around. It was him and his wife would go around the country presenting. I think he should be mentioned. I just thought of another one now. There's going to be more. He was known, I don't think I believe it. I know he was known for ignition analysis. And so is one of the next ones I'm going to rattle off. Maybe even more so than Mr. Fulton, but Bill Fulton was known for his articles and his classes on analyzing secondary ignition. I'm sure in some cases primary ignition, but secondary ignition, to make fairly accurate diagnostic decisions. Yeah, I'm sure if you fire up your web browser and punch in his name and articles, you should see some. I think he wrote for probably everybody, submitted articles. I don't know if I remember him being like a regular monthly columnist. He could have been, but honestly, he has quite a catalog of articles. So I said ignition and immediately trips a memory of another one who is no longer with us, Mac Vandenbrink. I have 2 sides of my memories of Mac, right? So I was lucky enough to meet him at Linder Technical Services and got to spend a week with him. He wasn't an instructor. He was there with a friend of his, and they took the Pico Guru, and he was there as an attendee. And that was an absolute blast to be around him. Mac was Danish, but he had that accent that many assumed he was a German, which used to really offend him for obvious reasons, because when he was young, he lived in Nazi-occupied Denmark. So, God, he had stories. That was one of his, we call it a side gig, storytelling. He's got a story about kind of raiding one of the Nazi warehouses. And he might not be alive if it wasn't raining. And the way the coats the Nazis wore and their helmets, they wouldn't really look up. They had to keep their heads down and their shoulders up, or else the water would just pour into their backs. So they were sneaking above them, and they're stealing, I think it was hopefully food or something valuable. And I think, if I recall, they ended up stealing a bunch of toothpicks. So I believe for a while his nickname amongst his friends was Toothpick or something to that nature. I'm sure his native tongue's version of that. He worked originally, I believe he was part of coming up with the Allen scope, if I remember right. SEA. I think he was a part of that, and extremely well known for ignition and ignition analysis. He was also kind of a developer or inventor, really an inventor Another, just like a side note, I was lucky enough to know this guy and his wife socially, that years and years ago, Elbin Moore would host a camp out around the 4th of July, and Mac and his wife had one of the bedrooms that was their bedroom. And in that bedroom, they had to keep kind of a little nightlight with a tablet and a pen or pencil ready to go, because Mac would wake up in the middle of the night with an idea and he needed to go write it down. And his brain was always going, always had these ideas, always had test tool ideas. I'll never remember the name of it, but he had a really, really slick tool for connecting to DIS, waste spark ignition systems, to let you scope them, because the issue with scoping them sometimes was that they kind of had a floating ground, if you will. So they weren't referenced to battery negative or, ultimately battery negative, right? So you get some pretty unstable waveforms, and Mac had a solution for that. Probably should have researched that to give you the name of it, but it's not all that important. Finding one would be insane. I think one of the people I'm going to put on my Mount Rushmore has one. I think he does. I don't know what it would be worth. The cool factor, the value of it shoots up if you knew Mac. And by the way, his wife's name was Louise. I think she is gone now too. Just lovely people. He had another tool. I think it was called like the Cop 3. And you could use that to briefly disable like a injector or a coil. Just always, his mind was always going. And again, a wonderful human being, a wonderful storyteller. God, he had stories. He had been in it. He had gone through a heck of a life. Another one that comes to mind is Norm Docknall. I think he was an inspiration for a lot. He is a personality. Let me tell you, he's got a powerful personality. And I mean that in the best way possible. Energetic, even now I would never pretend to guess what age he's at. He was one of those I think was very well known. And I think he had started a training company. And again, maybe should do some research on this, but I'm torn. It's either Aspire or Target. One or the two, or maybe both for all I know. But he was big into training, traveling. Again, one of those road dogs. Inspired. I know he inspired some of maybe the generation before mine, if you will, instructors. And for good reason, right? He was genuine, I guess, for who he was. The guy up front presenting was the same guy you were talking to in the hallway. Got a chance to meet him a few times. So that's very cool. And sat through a couple of his classes. And then another one is Jim Morton, who we probably know better because of social media, right? He's active in social media. He's still going to training conferences, and, Steckler helps spread the word about Mr. Morton and all that. Another one of those, right? He was the guy years ago. And I'm not saying he's not the guy anymore. It's not some dig. But when you're out there years ago, you're the one inspiring the next generation. Clearly, he inspired Steckler, right? So that's how that works. It's important to me to bring up these people because it bugs me, I guess, when people don't know about, I guess, those that laid the groundwork or some groundwork, or, that just, you find the same thing. I think I brought this up before, where it bothers me when people don't know old comedians or old entertainers, boxers, fighters, athletes, authors, when people don't know who Laurel and Hardy are, which is probably a bad example because they have those movie, but it's kind of sad because a lot of what they did holds water. Abbott and Costello might be a better reference because I don't think there has been a modern movie about them. And we could go on a tangent with that, but that would be an example. It's important, I think, to know, I don't know, like a lineage almost, or how the tree's roots, stuff like that. Now to kind of focus more on the actual Mount Rushmore. I think the easy one for me is John Thornton. Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He's been on the podcast for 2 episodes. If you haven't listened to them or watched them, I don't listen to it to listen to me. Do it to listen to John, because I'm telling you, I don't know that we've ever had somebody like that. I don't know if we're going to ever have somebody like that where, yeah, he's smart. Like he's really smart. He also had the education leading into this, not strictly automotive, like kind of an engineering background, and then getting into cars at a very interesting time, right? It was still carbureted, but he was there for the evolution into electronics. So you have that. You have the brains, you have the experience. And I don't mean experience like just years and years of experience. I mean the experience of when he got into it and the evolution through which he lived through. I don't mean he's just got all this decades and decades of experience, which he does, but that's not what I mean by that. Just a fierce determination to become better, not just as a diagnostician but also an educator. Like he put forth a ton of effort to become a better presenter. There's a strategy in what he does. There's a strategy in his handouts. There's a strategy in his presentations and the effort and the passion. And it just, I don't think we've not seen anything like that. I don't know that we ever will. That's not to really blow smoke up John's tail. I think it's almost lamenting because I don't think I'm nearly smart enough to do it. I don't think I have that sort of focus, that drive. Like I like to learn. I like to figure stuff out, but then to be very rigorous in preparation and all that. Like some people that know me just heard me use the word preparation and probably spit whatever they're drinking all over the keyboard or screen. Tracy right now is probably choking, so somebody better call and get some help. Otherwise, Tracy, you can actually stand behind a chair and kind of launch yourself over it and get a good almost Heimlich maneuver-ish with the back of the chair. That could save you. Yeah, and then after John, it's really Mr. Manna, Scott Manna, for many of the same reasons. And you kind of have a really neat situation where they live and work in rather close proximity. So they both benefited from each other, if that makes sense. Like they both became better because of it. And Scott, again, super, super smart. He puts, he's got his own little dungeon, if you will, in the basement where he assembles these classes and works so very hard at it. And he's got method to his madness, and why when he's up there in front of the class, there's a reason he's doing it. There's no madness involved. It's just the effort and the strategy to put forth a good class and educate you. It's deserving of being on Mount Rushmore of trainers. As you well know, tool truck dealers duck Scott Manna every week because they owe him money. Amazing human being. Now it gets rough. I have a lot of personal bias from, I guess, you see the classes that you see and that they resonate with you, or the instructor resonates with you. One of those is Dave Scaler. I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you've heard me say his name before. He is certainly not training full time, but at one time, he was a director of a company in kind of the New Jersey area called MEA, which I think stood for Mechanics Education Association. They had a phone in, like telephone tech support, mobile diagnostics, and then I believe it was like 3 or 4 nights a week they would have classes. And the classes I think were aimed at, being an hour or two, no handouts, so right up my alley. They very specific, like you come in to learn about this DTC for this car. Very specific. Essentially, if you will, trying to almost train themselves out of jobs, which is hard to do. And Dave had a wicked memory and a wicked delivery, and he's I don't think it's the accent, honestly. He's just one of the funniest human beings I know. But he can go toe to toe with about anybody. Really, when it comes down to brass tacks, that guy could match wits with anybody. And a lot of the classes seemed dumbed down, right? Like he did an engine mechanical class using all gauges. He put up a couple waveforms with transducers, but really the idea of that was showing the level of detail, how that can become a distraction. And then going back to just the mechanical, or the, I should say, the tests with the gauges, and coming to the same diagnostic conclusion very quickly. He also, the goal was to know what's wrong with the car in 5 minutes. Like he'd say that over and over. It's like, I got 5 minutes. Was everything 5 minutes? Probably not, but that was the goal. Let me gather as much information as I can, and let me do it with the tools that most of them have. And there wasn't a lot of scope stuff. It was a lot of meter stuff, and they would figure out how to diagnose something with a test light, with a meter, with some jumper wires, to just get down and be nitty gritty, where you don't need the equipment, you don't need to nitpick or whatever. I get it. And the thing is Dave could do the tough stuff. Like don't kid yourself. When he's telling you got to put your meter on this circuit and you need to see this voltage, whatever it is, you need to see 3.2 volts or, whatever the range is, 2.3 volts to 3.8 volts, something like that. Don't kid yourself. He's had a scope on it. He knows what the scope should do. He can interpret those results. It was all a sham saying he didn't have time for that. He absolutely knows how. He absolutely knew how to. But that wasn't his clientele. That was not the people he was teaching to. So he had to bust out what they had and figure out how they could use what they had to get to the result they needed. And sometimes the result was really, what could they report to the hotline? One of those people that was on that hotline is Ira Waldman, and a trainer with Tim Easy. They had a bunch of other just heavy hitters on that tech line service. It was insane. And then they had to take turns doing mobile calls, so they had to keep their hands dirty. It was very, very neat entity, very, very neat company, if you will. And Dave would do classes like Diesel for Gas Guys. And like I said, that engine mechanical class, like it was really down and dirty. Let's get this car figured out and fixed. If there was any way you could see him, I would jump at that opportunity. Like I said, I don't think he's been certainly not on the circuit for a while. And then the fourth, to kind of wrap up this Mount Rushmore. This feels like I'm like skirting it a little bit, but the reason I'm going to say this the way I'm going to say it is I can't disassociate the two, and I could probably throw a third in there. So I'm going to say Jim Kemper, Randy Burnclaw, and then really, so those two do a lot of classes together, and I think an honorable mention with those two is Bob Halfman. And Randy Burnclaw used to own a repair shop in Colorado. I think it was Fort Collins, to be honest, but I could be wrong. Super smart individual who now works for, I believe, the Colorado State Department of Health. He was working with Jim Kemper, of course, was on the podcast. If you haven't listened to that, another wickedly smart individual. And they would do these classes together. And a lot of times Bob Halfman was heavily involved. And Bob Halfman was an extraordinarily smart individual who sold Coda products. So the Coda exhaust gas analyzer, I mean, at one time, and maybe arguably still, was the bench to have. It was the best. What it maybe didn't do that more modern gas analyzers do is the volume, I don't think, was quite as much. So the reaction time wasn't as fast as now. Our transfer delays are much less, where I think my EMS bench right now takes about 4 to 5 seconds to respond. The Coda bench would take more like, it was probably pushing 15 seconds to respond. But regardless, what it told you was extraordinarily accurate. And then they had a fuel system analyzer that Mighty Vac kind of now, I don't know if I want to say copied, but it was a pressure gauge with a kind of a volume. So you'd connect it in series, and then it would show you the volume as well as the pressure, and you could find, people would find problems so fast with it. But Bob was a salesman and did support, and I think he serviced the benches and he put on classes, and super, super smart guy. Yeah, I wish you guys could meet some of these people. But Randy and Jim would do classes on emissions, and they were just at the forefront and knew so much. And sometimes that gets rough, right? Sometimes like the more you know, the more difficult it is to answer questions, because you can't whip out that broad paintbrush and just answer really generically. A former employee of Randy's, Matt Ragsdale, was very active on IETN back in the day, and he was one of those that also just wicked smart, unbelievable memory. And because of that, because so many things, you would see answers, you could just see the struggle to answer things generically, because you almost can't. There's a lot of yeah buts involved. So yeah, that would be my Mount Rushmore. And then I don't think I can top them off the cuff. Somebody will probably message me and then I'll feel horrible. Some honorable mentions, I think. And these are ones that might end up on there someday. Very well could. The first one that comes to mind is Pedro Della Torre. I get it, we're friends. It sounds terribly biased. I think I can say and take a step back and remove that bias, that he is cut from a lot of the same thread as some of those guys. Sky's the limit. Extremely knowledgeable, puts so much effort into his presentations. It's so admirable just to know about it and see it at work and stuff like that. Another one I think is Keith Perkins. Again, puts together really, really good content, works very hard at it and studying it, and just kind of dogged with it. Broken record, right? I mean, they're all really smart. He's another one of those super smart guys. Scott Schotten and is one of those that I think has inspired many. And he's been around the world doing training. So he's another one that needs to be mentioned in that. And I'm probably forgetting people now. Actually, another one, Randy Dillman. If you ever got to see Randy Dillman do a class, he's working with Pico right now, but that guy, super, super smart. And when he took you through a process, whatever that was, I got to witness him through just an intro to lab scope class and then a Pico scope class. And I'm talking about back in Pico 6 days. So this is going back. Just very regimented in how he was presenting it, to what process he wanted you to go through, and just a great, great experience. And then another one, I don't know how many classes he's doing now or how many we'll see him do, but when he was going, Justin Morgan, man, what a riot. And then what a ride. Like, that guy could fire off information and keep you just so engaged because of it, because of his wits and the way he thought about things and worked through problems, but also just the quick quips here and there just would keep you locked in. Gonna talk like my kids, got to be locked in. Justin kept you locked in. And if he's doing any more classes, he will keep you locked in. I kid you not. Boy, oh boy, keep going here. We're going to be here a long time. I'm going to call it after those. Otherwise, I think I'll just keep going. But yeah, those are the honorable mentions. The Rushmore it's going to be John Thornton, Scott Manna, Dave Scaler, and then it's like a tag team. Like, you have to put them up together. Randy Bernclaw, Jim Kemper. And then really, it would be hard for me not to put in Bob Half. And that's the Rushmore of trainers, or my Rushmore of trainers. I'm sure I'm missing some. I'm more worried about missing one of the kind of the groundwork layers. Rick Escalambre probably should have been mentioned with that. Gosh. And then the honorable mentions, I know I'm missing somebody. It's terrible. There's a lot of really good guys coming up. I would keep my eyes open or be aware of Mike Blackenary. I think he could be, he's already quite good, but I think he's another one of those to keep your eye on. Yeah. And if I forgot to mention you, I really apologize. But yeah, I think that's how I will leave you. If you disagree or you have people I forgot, please let me know. Shoot me an email at mattvonzelpodcast@gmail.com or instant messenger. Happy to hear that. Yeah, or any other trainers that you've been to that have really resonated with you. I'd love to hear about it. As always, thank you so much to our sponsors, Autel, Pico Technology, and Independent Wrench Jobs. Thank you to the Automotive Repair Podcast Network. And until next time, take care.